Bitcoin fixes the money. The Beef Initiative fixes the food and nutrition. Step into some new awareness that incorporates some much needed food intelligence into your life. This is Texas Slim with Texas Slim's Vision. Hey guys, good morning. It's July 6th, Wednesday, 11 a.m. Central Time. We're kind of back on the air with Texas Slim's Vision. I've been on the road for about 40 something days. Went all over the South. A lot of people know that I went out to Tennessee. We've got a special guest today. We're going to introduce Jim Mundorf of Lonesome Lands on Twitter. He is at Lonesome Lands and lonesomelands.com. In the meantime, I wanted to let everybody know we're going to start kind of introducing these podcasts with some updates as far as where we're going with the podcast. Texas Slim's Vision, Texas Slim's Media Company. We're now integrated fully into Podcasting 2.0. You can listen to us anytime on the Fountain app. If you don't have the Fountain app, go get it. You can earn sats while listening to the show at any time. You'll never hear outside ads. If you hear any ads or sponsors, it'll be from my mouth, who we're working with our sponsors locally, community-based, and we very much are fully supported by the listener, you. So if you find value in what we're providing to you, boost a message through the Fountain app, and we'll read you on the next podcast. Saying that, we've got some people that have been really paying attention to us. We've got 2,000 sats from at Nomad Joe. Thanks for your service, he says. 250 from at user 767, and I'll stop there. It's a long username. 5,000 sats from at Gilligan. Keep doing what you're doing. 333 sats from at Joe LW. Food Intelligence. Hashtag Food Intelligence. 5,000 sats from Tomato Deer from Breeds. 10,000 sats from Adam Curry. Hold coin. Here we go. Thanks, Adam. We appreciate you getting us set up on Podcasting 2.0. The team really appreciated your help during the last month. Another 10,000 sats from Adam Curry. 50,000 sats from Adam Curry. Thank you for Podcasting 2.0 promo. 10,000 sats from Adam Curry again. Can we build smaller distribution networks instead of relying only on UPS? Yes, that's something that we need to look into. We got Anonymous here, 577 sats. We've got 2,000 sats from Nomad Joe. Thanks for your service. Okay, guys, appreciate you. Let's keep the streaming going. Let's start paying attention to Podcasting 2.0. It's going to be something that we all rely on moving forward. It's censorship resistant. It's a value for value exchange. We need to start thinking about value for value exchange in our lives a little bit more. One thing that we focus on in the Beef Initiative is a value for value exchange within our food itself. What a better place to start than pure animal protein. Pure animal protein being provided by American rancher, people that have been in this their whole lives. Jim Mundorf is here today. He's out of Iowa. Hey, Jim, how you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
You bet. I've been following you for a while. I remember I was on Harvest last year up in North Dakota, and I'd been watching a couple of your podcasts, and you were talking a lot about the ranching industry, the manipulation that goes on within the ranching industry in America. I think a lot of people are not really familiar where our food comes from anymore. And you do a very good job of articulating who has control of that market access and how much of a lack of access we have to pure animal protein these days. By saying that, let's go into you a little bit more as a person, as a man, as a rancher, somebody in the ranching industry, and kind of where you come from. And what you're currently doing and how you see us moving forward in the United States within our beef industry.
Okay. Yeah. I'm from Southwest Iowa, a little town called Griswold, which is about 40 miles east of Omaha, Nebraska. And I grew up there we raised corn, soybeans, and we had a small feedlot and a real small cow-calf herd. And so I went on to college and was a communications major because I was really interested in media. Got done with that and started my own business called droverhouse.com, where I sell Longhorn artwork, Longhorn mounts and artwork. And I did that I still do that. That's my main business, but I've always kind of continued to work on the farm and with the cattle on the family farm there. And I think it's almost been 5 years. I think it was 2017. I kind of got back into the media thing, as when I got out of college, I knew I didn't want to work for any media company or really anybody. So I just went off and started my own business and did that. And as that grew, things have progressed with technology, and it's kind of like, well, you can do your own thing. And I've always kind of thought that just with Lonesome Lands, when I started that, I just wanted to kind of put out more of a rural perspective on the news or anything, and just give that perspective. I didn't really see myself going where it's went, but as I continued to look into things more, I've just kind of written as I've learned, and my eyes have really been open to what an absolute mess the cattle industry mainly is, really, and how it's just kind of based on really a fraudulent system that these 4 corporations control. And so that's where I'm at.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great place to start because, we see manipulation every year. I mean, you and I know a lot of the numbers and the stats, statistics and the percentages and everything, as far as a global apparatus, how they manipulate the beef industry. I was reading something the other day, and let's just for the general user, we have 4 major processors. It's JBS, it's National, it's Tyson, and Cargill. And, those are 4 of the major processors in the United States. And, they're not even in the United States. Let's look at, somebody like JBS. They're in Brazil. They're headquartered out of Brazil. Every year they get fined millions of dollars. And a lot of times it goes unseen. A lot of times the price manipulation happens. I believe one of your cast, it was pretty recent, sometime this year, you brought up the fact that the owner of JBS went to prison in 2017-18, I believe. And, it was for bribing the Brazilian president in their legislative branch. Well, they didn't mention as well that there was a lot of bribing going on in the United States as well. And so, they go through these lawsuits, they go through, the lobbying apparatus that we have to maneuver, and especially the rancher themselves has to maneuver around, and they get these, slaps on the wrist, in the millions of dollars, but they never really say, well, what was the outcome from that fine? Well, usually I think JBS was fined this year, $56 million for price manipulation during COVID, but they ended up making about $500 million. And
yeah, and that was actually,
go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that was actually a settlement. They settled that. So they weren't fined. They just paid it so that lawsuit would not go to court.
How convenient. Yes.
Right.
And so, and that's what, the general public, they don't see that. It's like, that's just part of doing business. If you're going to manipulate the United States beef industry, you're going into it, you've got this little side fund here that you're going to be willing to pay because the margins that you're making on the back end and how you maneuver through that is just, it's worth doing business that way. And why would they not? And it's up to our legislative branch, our beef industry, our lobbyists, our cattle industry, our representatives to stop that. But we don't see it. I mean, we're losing percentages every year in the ranching industry in the United States of America. And the type of protocols that they're putting on the American rancher is, really leaving the American rancher out there vulnerable, not to be a rancher anymore, to be, different type of operators to where they don't have a say so on how that cow is stewarded, how that land is stewarded anymore. From where we came from, let's just say in the last 50 years, I mean, we're at a breaking point sometimes, I see. And, voices like you need to be heard more. And that's, what the Beef Initiative is about. That's my main purpose right now, is giving you guys a voice. So saying that, I mean, what do you do on a daily basis these days? Because we've been trying to get together for a while, and I know you go and you travel, and what is the daily life of Jim?
Yeah. So, and I was telling you before, I haven't really put out a whole lot of content lately, just because like Lonesome Lands, that website is really just, it's kind of like I'm just putting money into it and time into it and not really getting a whole lot back. So then I kind of all of a sudden have to focus really on my work, and I have a wait list of customers that I'm constantly trying to fulfill orders and make time to work on Lonesome Lands. But then, and I'm committed to working on the family farm, and that schedule there is pretty set in stone. When planting comes, I kind of have to drop everything, and I help plant and work cattle. We did a couple weeks ago for a couple days. And so as far as a standard day, there's, like today, I'll just work on horn stuff, and then I'll do your podcast, and then I'll probably go back and work on horn stuff. And I got horses at a different place because I was out of town and got to bring them back. So it's kind of like your typical anybody that works in agriculture is just constantly kind of running around and trying to stay ahead of things. But it seems like I'm pretty well behind all the time. But I am focusing on getting more videos up, and more content. And I kind of had this deadline of July is where I'm really going to try to ramp things up. So this is getting me motivated, to get there.
Yeah, well, and like I said, I mean, we're going to help you out. I mean, that's what we do in the Beef Initiative. I mean, we've helped other ranchers so far, even just getting their the rancher, if they're selling beef, or if they're wanting to educate, you can come into the Beef Initiative, put your information on there, and it fits anybody's system. It fits your own business model. It's really about giving you market access to a new audience, an audience that is really looking for you and wanting to learn from you. It doesn't have to be about selling beef. It could be education about beef, or just education about the agricultural industry in the United States. And, like I said, I mean, a lot of the truth out there has been stifled. And, what we have to do is we have to do one rancher at a time. We have to do one cow at a time. We have to do, one business model at a time. I love the fact that, a lot of your work is with the Texas Longhorn. You've got a little system there behind you, a little hat rack, it's got the Texas Longhorns. Tell us a little bit more what you do at the Longhorns. What is your approach to that?
Yep. So, well, from start to finish, and right now I'm having a hard time getting horns. So if anybody, I mean, I need big horns. A lot of people have the smaller ones, but
yeah.
And so really start to finish, I drive to packing plants or different people I know that'll have horns. There's ranchers that cattle have died on their property. I pick them up, bring them back to my shop here. You got to clean them, pull the bones out, sand them, polish them, and then I build all kinds of different stuff. Furniture, sculptures, mainly mounts is what I do a lot of. But
yeah. Well, I've seen that website, and so we'll get everybody looking at that as well. And it's part of utilizing the cow. I mean, we've all as far as everybody that comes from ranching, you always utilized as much as you could, off the cow. The type of cuts of a cow that we don't even get to see anymore, having to buy through the market access, which is supermarkets, which is basically controlled by the processors and packers, have really caused a lot of ignorance in this nation about where we came from when utilizing the cow and everything about the cow, turning everything and honoring that the steer, the longhorn, whatever it is, in a way that we've learned from history, from Native Americans with the bison, in ways that I believe that the market access to full understanding of what the cattle industry is and how it became so powerful in the United States. We went out there and we started feeding the nation. And one of the first, types of cow that we used was the Longhorn from Texas, and how that migrated up. We started feeding the nation, in the 1880s. And we started these cattle drives. We started the cattle drives that went all the way out to military bases. They drove them up north, to Kansas to Iowa, all the way, use the rail systems as, the railway started coming across and going east to west and north and south in the United States. And one thing that, today most people think that, I just got on the road, I was on the road for about 40 days, like I said. And I found one thing, and it was fascinating to me, that people really do not know where food comes from. They don't know where beef comes from. They think it comes from the supermarket. Um, as a rancher, somebody that utilizes the cow, that has, boots on the ground approach to your life, to your business model and everything. Let's go through the life of a small independent rancher, and what do you do with that cow from day one, and then taking it to maybe to market, if you can take it to market, or if you're selling it to a feed yard, or you're selling it to the processor. Let's paint that picture so people can get a better understanding of how you guys have to maneuver in the industry that is basically stifling the rancher these days.
Yeah. So, and it almost, it might be, as you're saying that, it might be better to go backwards from the fat cattle getting
Sure.
sold to the processor, because that's kind of what the whole, and that's where it gets really confusing. And even for people in the cattle industry, it gets confusing because there's so many steps along the way. And if you're not marketing fat cattle, a lot of the ins and outs just aren't there, because a lot of the majority of fat cattle are sold under confidential agreements called AMAs. If you've been following anything, they're alternative marketing agreements is what they are. And it used to be called captive supply. Now they call it these AMAs to make it sound better. But what it is a supply of cattle that the packers already own, that are in feed yards. And those cattle are sold using confidential agreements with the pricing's confidential. It all does get reported to the USDA, but you don't know who's getting what price. And a lot of the problem there is just the most simplified explanation is you're getting a better price based on quantity. If you can supply more of what those packers want, you're going to get a better price. So the bigger get better prices and continue to get bigger. And the little guys just have to, and then how the cash market, so cash is through an auction where they actually bid on the fat cattle. And so the whole price for every animal downstream from them. So now to go back to the beginning, we have a cow-calf herd, which means we have cows and we breed those cows to bulls, or we AI them. They have babies and those calves, and we raise them up to where, we actually wean them and background them for a little while, and we'll sell them at 10, 12 months old. And they will go on to a feed yard or a wheat pasture or something like that. And the people that buy them will be either stockyards or cattle feeders, or stockers, they'll call them, or backgrounders or cattle feeders. And those people just buy the cattle and they'll put them in either a feed yard, or, like I said, they'll put them out on pasture to get them to gain some more weight. And then from there, they'll go to a finishing yard, which is where they will continue to put on, gain weight, and be fed. And then they'll go to the beef processor. But all those prices down the line are based on this cash market, which doesn't take into account all these confidential marketing agreements that the big feed yards have with the beef processors. And I know that's confusing, and that's part of the issue.
Right. Yeah. And what it is, there's a lot. Yeah. Okay. There's a lot of touch points there, right? There's a lot of touch points there that, people are making.
Yeah. I mean, even me explaining it, I get into
I'm
so difficult. It's confusing. I mean, how is somebody going to understand it? And that's part of the problem, is they have such it is complicated, and people kind of, it's like it's purposefully complicated. Like, well, you don't understand. Just like anything, like the mortgage industry, insurance, anything, they want to complicate it as much as they can so that it's easier to manipulate.
100%. I mean, we live in a commodity world. We live in a subsidized world. Subsidies are just, nobody can even know how to track them. We have USDA insurance policies. We have so many different, ways. And I always ask a lot of people, I say, hey, where do you think the value of the cow is these days? And that's something hard to explain. People don't really know where the value is. Is it in the feed yard? Is it in that grain that they're having to be pushed upon them to get them even fatter, with the processing packers that have full control over that? Rancher doesn't have control of his cattle anymore, and he gets rid of it in that stream that you basically, that sequence of events that you can look at from that cash market, the unknown marketing agreements and stuff like that. But if you look at the value of the cow now, in the past, it was, well, maybe it was in the land itself, or maybe it was in the cow itself. And it was a much more simpler time. And it was much more empowering for the rancher to be able to be that rancher, to steward that animal. We've created so many bottlenecks to generate that revenue for the rancher. And it is that middle ground of a black hole that a lot of people don't know how to maneuver through. And having to investigate, having to be an expert in all of that really takes time. It takes money. It takes, community. It takes so many different touch points of understanding to where you can be actionable. But one thing that, a lot of people really don't understand, that one of the biggest bottlenecks is processing dates and securing those dates as an independent rancher, smaller, rancher. And the more that you sell to the processors, the easier those processing dates are. If you're a small cow calf operation, you're just not going to get there. You're not going to have a sense of sovereignty or independence to be able to have that independence of making those choices.
Right. And a lot of it depends on, where you're at, how far you are from the actual processing plant. But if you go into that and you're talking about the history, and that's something I've kind of went into too. My grandpa, if you want to go back to kind of where I'm from, and this is what I've been looking at too. My mom talks about, he had milk cows that he would milk, I think 8 cows a day, and they would sell the cream. And this is just kind of what a farm was like, 50, 60 years ago. So they would have income from selling the cream from milk cows. He had hogs that he would raise from birth to slaughter weight. He had cattle he would raise from birth to slaughter weight. And they had eggs that they would sell to somebody who would come by, I think every day or like once a week or something, and pick up eggs. And then he would grow corn, hay, oats, just a whole variety of different income streams. And if you go down to it now, in this neighborhood, the vast majority of people make an income off of corn and soybeans.
Yeah.
And that's it. If you go into the cattle industry, not too far from where I'm at was the first IBP packing plant, which really, if you get into the history or of beef processing, IBP really revolutionized. They were Iowa beef packers. They revolutionized beef packing. And when they built that packing plant, their goal was to buy directly from the farmers. And the one thing that really sticks with me is the guy that built it. He said, so at the time it was stockyards. The stockyards was the way to sell cattle. And, if you're familiar with these towns, Kansas City, Omaha, Fort Worth were major stockyards, and everybody would take their cattle there, and that's where they would sell them. IBP, there was direct marketing before IBP, but they really pushed it. And what they want to do is go directly to the cattle, to the farmer, and buy cattle directly from him. And he said, when he built that plant, he said, 100-mile radius is my stockyards, because every farm has a cow in it. Every farm has cattle on it. In 2015, that packing plant closed. And one of the reason they said they closed was because they could not find enough cattle. And the reason for that was the cattle industry has just been shrunk to the point where, these farms it's just not worth it for them to have cattle on them. My family is really into livestock. I love doing it. My brother loves doing it. My dad's had cattle all his life. And so the reason we're still with it is just because we love it. Like, right. If you look at grain prices now, it's almost kind of crazy to have any sort of pasture land that could be farmed, and profitable. So, and all of that is kind of the whole beef, removing beef from the farm is kind of a, it's all about efficiency, and that's what the beef packing industry will tell you. It's all about efficiency, but it's efficient for them mainly. And so that's just kind of what I've been looking into, and kind of the history of where we've gone. I can't remember what your question was, but
No, I mean, it's good. Everything that, that like this conversation right now, I mean, you and I are around it a lot. We talk about it a lot, but what we kind of lose sight of is the form of even just having this general conversation right now, how really informative and educational it is for a lot of people. They can look at things differently now. And, just giving the history of what it was, IBP, Iowa Beef Packing. I come outside of Amarillo, Texas, up in the Texas Panhandle. I mean, it had stockyard there. Everybody, that's where we grow up. I mean, you go to the stockyard. I mean, it was the stockyards. It was fascinating. Amarillo, Canyon, that area of the Panhandle was, established by Charles Goodnight. And James Oliver, and basically that was one of the cattle drives that they used. Lonesome Dove. I mean, that's what it was written about, was Charles Goodnight and Oliver. But people really don't understand the history of the cattle drive. And I talk about it all the times, like, well, we have a new modern day cattle drive, and one of them that you don't like, it starts in Brazil. And, we're getting right now, a lot of the beef that is actually consumed in the United States comes from Brazil. It doesn't come from the United States. Brazil, they export over, I think it's close to 2 million tons last year of beef. Okay, well, the United States only exported 1.4. But the thing about it is that exported beef, it goes to Japan, it goes to South Korea, it goes to China, it goes to Europe, it goes to the highest bidder. So even the great beef that we do steward and raise in the United States, we don't get to consume it. We do not have market access, and that market access is controlled by, let's say, JBS, that is from Brazil. That cow starts in Brazil, ends up in Mexico, ends up becoming a fat cow, and then it's being processed in the state of Texas, and it gets that USDA prime stamp on it. And just be able to uncover that awareness of how the ranching industry works, and how basically the American rancher, each year, a percentage of the ranchers are disappearing because they do not have that market access to a clean processing center that they can use. They can't afford to, raise 10,000 cattle every year and make profit off that 10,000 cattle. Maybe they want to do a herd of 200 or even smaller than that. Well, they don't have market access to be able to take that cow all the way from the soil all the way to your fork and then make the profit off of it. If you have that market access that is through let's say like IBP, they had these smaller processing abattoirs and facilities all across the Midwest. And it was common. It's like my grandfather used them. Everybody here in the Texas Panhandle, that's what you use, IBP, because there were microprocessors. How many microprocessors have been mothballed, like you said? Well, it's phenomenal. And the reason that is because it is becoming such a global industry that has each year taken that power away from the American rancher, and people just don't see it. They don't know how to disseminate it. So these conversations are valuable, and we can build on that intelligence and the education to where we start creating a market access that's different up in the mind, and people can start looking at our communities and saying, hey, how can I get back to what our grandparents did? How can we look at our community and start buying and creating a new consumer demand that's not over here at HEB or Kroger or Walmart or Costco, but it's actually to your local community, to your local rancher, to where I can go up and shake your hand, Jim, and say, hey, I want to buy half a cow from you. And say, sure, we've got a processing center here that we're using. It's not one of the major four. And, that way you and I know each other. We establish that relationship. We have market access that we're peer to peer. You're making the profit more so now because it's just between you and I. It's a peer-to-peer transaction instead of everything in the middle and all the price manipulations that go along with that. And just you having this conversation, I think it really does enlighten a lot of people.
Yeah, that's kind of the goal, like I said, with as far as what I'm covering. And I'm just kind of learning right along with other people. And there's a lot of people, even in the livestock industry, that that just don't realize, because that's probably the biggest thing or the worst thing that I've seen is how little just these processors are covered, and how little people know about. Like, to me, it seems like pretty big news when the largest meat packer in the world goes to prison for bribery. I mean, if you look at what JBS has done, so JBS took money out of U.S. banks. They used a Manhattan apartment and bribed Brazilian officials so that they were able to get these. It's really like a subsidy. I think Brazil has a national bank, so they were able to get loans from that national bank to buy whatever they wanted. And one of the things they wanted was Swift Foods out of U.S., which at the time was the third largest beef packer in the U.S. So they used U.S. money to bribe Brazilian officials to get this fraudulent, this illegal obtained loan to purchase the third largest beef packer in the U.S. And that's how JBS became the largest beef packer in the world, meat packer in the world. And now they are able. So they have this history of bribing officials, and now they're able to import or export from Brazil and into the U.S. different cuts of meat, and that meat is able to have a product of the USA label on it, and consumers have no way of distinguishing unless their supermarket has a program. They have no way of distinguishing what steaks come from U.S. ranches and Brazil. And I mean, just that information there, I feel like it has never been headline news. And I mean, I feel like you could write a movie on the whole thing if you really get into it. It's just crazy. Like, it's just such a weird thing. And learning about it, it's like, holy smokes. And every time you learn more, it's like, holy smokes. Tyson Foods is the same way. I mean, they bribed the Secretary of Agriculture under Clinton. They bribed him with money and gifts, and really their plea deal was that John and Don Tyson got immunity in the deal, and then they just had to pay some money. So to me, it's just, and that's part of the big problem is the beef packers also control the beef checkoff. The beef checkoff advertises in all of ag media to their ranchers, which makes no sense at all. And it tells them how good the beef checkoff is. But then ag media is kind of beholden to the checkoff, which is controlled by the processors, and they aren't going to ever write anything bad about it. And so the national media doesn't hear anything about it because ag media won't cover it. And so
that's a slippery slope. It's a fine line you have to walk of kind of, I'll say, exposing the truth here, and not trying to compromise people's ways of life. And you go from ag media all the way into the academic institutions, and finding out how all these academic programs are financed, who they're financed by. And you get some old school guys saying, hey, this is just how it is. This is how it's always been in my life.
I mean, the most recent Senate, just a great example. There's a guy named Stephen Coons. He's out of Colorado State, and he goes around talking about how we can't regulate these beef processors. He's an economist. He says, the ranchers will lose money if they try to regulate. Do any new regulations on the beef processors or beef packers, because it's actually going to hurt the ranchers. But if you go back to Colorado State, which is where he works, Colorado State has their research facility is called the Five Rivers Research Facility. Five Rivers is the largest feed yard in the world, or in the U.S., I guess I should say, by a lot. They have over 1 million head of cattle on feed, and they are all in on these AMAs, and they have probably the best pricing you can get for cattle because they have the most. And they were once owned by JBS. Five Rivers was purchased by JBS. There's people who running Five Rivers were once JBS employees. So it's, and they donate heavily to Colorado State. they funded their whole research facility. So how much research can you even trust when the largest, it's just such a mess when you really get into looking at
It's
and
daunting. Yeah.
yeah.
It's completely daunting and it's frustrating. And you just go, well, what the hell? And I always just tell everybody, well, we got to get back to the source of the seed of where we came from. Let's start there. Let's start with, from the ground up here. And, let's talk about a vertical integration back into food. And, it is a community at a time. We're not going to solve the world's problems here. The war on meat is real. A lot of the, the fake meat stuff that's been going on for this last decade, all the amount of billions of dollars that have been poured into this new fake commodity that they're building, fake protein, fake vegetable, 3D printed meat, from stem cell meat to everything that's coming our way. A lot of people don't realize a lot of them, hundreds of millions of dollars of research dollars have been funded by the packers themselves, the processors themselves. They're some of the biggest. If you
get into that, I think the USDA just gave, I think 10 million. I mean, you get into these numbers and that's the whole thing. The way the government has screwed everything up, but USDA has given, I think it's $10 million for research into lab created meat, which is, to me, I don't spend a whole lot of money on the fake meats just because I covered it 5 years ago, when the beef packers invested in it. And since then, it has nothing but lose value. And, they have said every year this lab meat is coming out by the end of the year. And that was like 5 years ago. It never happens. They just continue to dump money into this. But I mean, that's where I go back to now the U.S. taxpayer is dumping money into lab grown meat. And if anyone had an idea of how this stuff is grown, it's just so, you talk about, there's been this whole push for no antibiotics in livestock. This lab grown meat is grown in a petri dish of antibiotics. So it's just
well, it's not real, for one. And, it takes and it goes to, and it exploits, and it shows the true detachment we have from what real food is, how we got here, what true nutrition is. And you look out there in the global marketing plan that is, that's controlled by the medical, the pharmaceutical, and the agricultural complex that we all have to operate in, for our consumption models. We don't eat unless we have permission from chemical companies, because of technology use agreements for, the amount of money that they do to push all this new technology and science that they use to basically say that we've got this new and improved form of nutrition and we're bringing it to you. But like you said, I mean, it's an industrial shift is what's going on. And in the long run, they're not going to basically kill the cow, take meat out of our consumption. What they're doing is turning it to where it's more priced like caviar, to where we, the common man, don't have access to it. And it's going to go to the highest bidders. And everybody else will still be eating this phenomenal meat, but all this fake meat, the lab grown meat, the pea protein meat, the soy protein meat, the vegetable-based meat products that they've, science and engineered for tasting and texture and everything. Well, it already makes it into all of our products. I mean, especially you look at Tyson, you look at everything that goes into any type of meat product they sell. They stack these fake commodities on top of fake commodities, and then they tell you it's meat. Used to, you'd get a burrito that was 50% beef and 50% bean. Let's say it's a combination burrito. Well, now it might have 8% beef, and then you're just going to have 30% of these different types of proteins that they're developing in these labs. And then a lot of the beans are going to be the same type of bean that is developed in these labs. So what they're really moving for, you look what's going on in the Netherlands. They're shutting down 50% of the farmers in the Netherlands right now because they have faith. They're using climate change as the reason in the narrative that they have to do this. Nitrogen, carbon, the cow is now a global carbon hazard. But what people don't understand is their food, the industrial shift that they're doing is they're taking the cow out of the ground. They're taking the food product out of the ground, and they're developing in the lab. And they think that they can do this because a lot of the soil has been damaged so much by the chemicals. And, where we've gotten to now, with the manipulation of the cow itself, the fat cows, the antibiotics, all the steroids that they, they use that we end up consuming. Well, they think that they can do it in the lab now. They don't need the soil.
Yeah, and it sounds kind of crazy to, it's just to your average consumer sitting there watching, seeing people like you and me talk about it. But the JBS, I'm pretty sure one of their higher executives, it could have been their CEO, kind of said that. He said that in the future, he saw beef to be like a luxury item, to where only the, really the high, the rich people would be able to afford it, and more of the middle class, like your average meat products, would be manufactured. Like pure steaks are just going to be a luxury item, and that's the biggest meat packer in the world. And that's where he sees things going. I would say that's probably a goal for them, because it's cheaper for them to produce. Their profit margins are higher on them, I would assume, because that's why they're pushing it. And then they don't have to deal with people like me or, anybody that raises cattle. They would really just not have, they would control the whole system. And the fewer independent ranchers there are, it's better for the beef packers. And that's definitely how they see it.
Well, and why would they change? Why would they not go for the highest profit margins? That's what they do anyways. They get, they settle out of court for millions of dollars because they make hundreds of $1 million on the backside, like we talked before. Why wouldn't they do, especially if they're a global company, and it's a global apparatus now that basically, the one world food group, things that are going on when I say food industrial shift, what do I mean by that? Well, it means as far as how food is processed, how food is created. It also means all these factories, these processing centers, they get to reinvent the processing center to where it's upgraded technology, food science, and they use all this. Well, your food's going to be cleaner. And everything that they use as excuses is better for the environment. They're digitizing our food in ways that people really don't understand, and they're digitizing our consumption models, and it'll be predictive. It's like, we know what you buy at the grocery store. We know what you think tastes good. We know that we don't have to basically provide you meat anymore. I think the other day there was a report, it was a global report that came out and said 72% of everybody in the last year have already started cutting back on their meat consumption because of the price. When they say that, well, these packers and these processing plants, they're not losing money. They're making record profits. So it's not affecting them. It's affecting the individual that are trying to raise families based on nutrition and protein, and they don't have market access to it. And you look at the health, I work with a lot of doctors, and you look at what they're seeing when the patients are coming in, kids are coming in with testosterone counts of 200 when they should be 12 to 1400. Well, that's a lack of animal protein, and a lot of people don't understand that. So it's already affecting our health as a nation. We're metabolically bankrupt in many ways because we don't have market access to pure animal protein anymore, and it's getting worse. And that's kind of it's not being alarmist, because me, you, people that are listening to the show, our consumer demand is going to be different. We will still have a way and a market access to engineer our consumer demand that we don't have to play that game. But we have to get there. We have to create this general awareness across the board of that vertical integration back into, how our grandfathers did it. And I work with ranchers here in the state of Texas, grass farmers, ranchers. We have Panhandle Meats, Justin Trammell. He's up here in the Panhandle. He just opened up his processing center. He's from the soil all the way to the fork. He has control of that. He has a new revenue stream because he gets to kill when he wants to kill. His kill dates are decided by him instead of the big four. We have Cole Bolton of K&C Cattle down south of Austin and Luling. He's opening up Hometown Meats. He's going to be a little bit bigger, and his market access and the community in the region that he's going to be able to provide is based on his protocol. He gets to call the shots. It's decentralized. It's a vertical integration. And I call it back a vertical integration back into human health, because we have control as the consumer. Say our consumer demand is going to shift now. We're not going to pay attention to you guys anymore, because look where you got us. Look where you've taken the American rancher of a stance of power and sovereignty into now more of a codependency and something that is more captured than it is about independence and having a way to basically make a living that's not based on price manipulations, commodity prices, subsidies, and, the USDA insurance policy as a whole. And it is daunting, but here we go. We're doing it. We're having these conversations, and you bringing out there, you being somebody that's lived this your whole life. I mean, I just want to compliment you and let you know that this is a valuable thing that you're doing, and people will grow. People will start paying attention, and helping you have a voice is one of my biggest goals right now.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it.
You bet.
One of you were talking about your process. Are you familiar with Herzog Meats?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's up by Kansas City, and
Mhm.
I was able to see a presentation he did last year, and it was really neat. And he was so he just went out on his own. I think it was before, might have been right around the time of COVID, but they built a multi-million-dollar processing facility mainly for their local area, and they're able to process local cattle and sell to their local area, and they've been able to get into local grocery stores and all that. So it's been neat to see, and I know there's a lot of there's these multi-million-dollar bee processing. There's one announced in South Dakota, and it's hard not to get excited about that kind of news, but really I go back to what I'd like to see is more of Herzog Meats type of processing. If we get those, it's like he said, if we can get those around, 2 or 3 of those around every major city in the country, that would be a way better deal for ranchers than another $300 million facility or whatever they said up in South Dakota. I mean, it's always good to have demand, but if you look at the history of how those things have went, the big four, those four processors have so much control of the industry. When somebody comes out, there's been multiple packers try to start up, try to get in and be as big as them, and all they have to do, if they show any success, those other packers can easily buy them out every time.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
to me, those large facilities are just another. I mean, National Beef now is the third largest packer in the country. They're majority owned by Marfrig, which is now out of Brazil, and they were started by a group of ranchers. National Beef bought out. They were a group of ranchers that started a co-op. I'm pretty sure that bought out farmland beef processing, and so I mean they were just it was the same thing as kind of what's going on in Nebraska, and they got big enough and they sold to a major food processor out of Brazil. So it's just those big ones are it's hard to be negative about it, but if you look at the history, it's kind of like, well, here we go again.
Well, we'll go back on what you were talking about earlier. IBP and Tyson. Who bought IPP? Well, it was Tyson, and that's what they do. That's their MO, and why not? I mean, they've got enough capital, they've got enough debt, money that's based on debt. Then they can go there, and they have a big sword that they can wield. And I always like to say, we have to nickel and dime this approach. We have to get these smaller county. And, my dream is to have, a small processing center like Panhandle Meats in every county across Texas. And it's lofty and everything, but you're starting to see it. You're starting to see these microprocessors here in the state of Texas. We are working with, Farm and Ranch Freedom Allowance. We have some people on our side. We have, people that are in the inspection, industry or for the state of Texas. They, we had one of the major inspectors come to Justin's opening or in his inspection. And he goes, "We need this in the state of Texas." So you have the legislation, you have the lobbyists that are really trying, but it is. I mean, you open up a $300 million processing plant, that's a bullseye. It is. It's like, okay, go ahead and get up and running, and then we're going to come over. We're
Build your facility so we can in a few years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you look at Tyson Foods, like, I mean, Bill Clinton, and it goes back to, like, we have these antitrust laws in the U.S. and they're just 100% ignored. Tyson Foods, the number one chicken processor, buying the number one beef processor. I mean, that's like the definition of a beef trust or a meat trust. if you go back to when the antitrust laws were written. And Bill Clinton gave the eulogy at Don Tyson's funeral. I mean, that's how close they were. And, right now, Mike Beebe, the ex-governor of Arkansas, which is where Tyson is located, he is on the board of directors for Tyson Foods. I mean, do you think they had a close relationship when he was in politics? And he's still, he works, he's part of a think tank in DC. You think he's visiting, some of these lawmakers when these laws and regulations are being proposed? It's obvious a lot of these politicians are, they influence USDA, and the USDA has so much power, and they don't wield any of it to control beef packing. So, I mean, it's really an uphill climb, but I guess not to be, completely negative or to scare people so much. What we've seen in the last couple years has really been a push to buy local. There's really an interest there. And so like these packers or these small lockers you've been talking about, they wouldn't exist without the consumer. And so that's really, to me, that's where the whole thing, the consumers are being educated, and they are searching out trying to buy locally. And so there is good things happening.
Well, and that's us as individuals. I remember, growing up in the 70s, that's when my childhood was. I'm a Gen Xer. And, in 73, Eric Butt says, hey, he went up to my grandfather, all the farmers, your grandparents, said, you're going to go big or you're going to go home. And you were talking about earlier, it's like now it's just like wheat and soy, and that's what they make their money off of. They had to go fence to fence. And, one of the things that they used at that time to say that this is your obligation, your responsibility is, hey, we're going to go feed the world. And that's, we got to do that. We're the United States of America. We're going to feed the world. Well, we got to lose that mentality, one, because that's not what we do. We didn't do it in the first place. There's still poverty. There's still malnutrition. There's nutritional starvation is rampant in this world. We didn't end up feeding the world. Is what we did is we created an agricultural complex that basically is manipulated, and the profit margins are spread out to a very few amount of people. So by saying that, as the individual, as an individual consumer, it is up to us to create a new consumer demand. And how you do that is you look at that vertical integration from the soil to the grass, to the cow, to the producer, to the processor, to the supplier, to your market access that you create by looking in a different way. Understanding where you live, understanding what's out there, going through the beef initiative. We're having more and more producers come in through the beef initiative producer section. And everyone that I've talked to in person or, through the phone or through, social media, whatever it is, they say that they're getting a lot more awareness. People are looking for that new market access. They are driving that consumer demand. And it's one person, it's one family, it's one community at a time. And if you can scale down your expectations and put into a perspective of how our grandparents thought, that's what they did. I mean, they traded hogs, they traded cow, they traded fowl, they traded produce. And that's all they really were concerned about. But they knew that their community was all going to be taken care of. And you had that food security. You had that confidence that you knew that you were eating some of the best food because it was locally grown, which a lot of people don't realize how important it is to eat food where you are standing, from the soil in which you stand upon. That's why a lot of ranchers and regenerative ranchers are, they have beehives, they're bee producers as well because of the honey. And if you can get down and to look and reflect on where we came from, it's not that daunting. It's actually a new lifestyle that actually is empowering. And if we can put it in perspective, like you say, that's our responsibility, is letting people know that, change your perspective first, and then we'll step forward.
Yeah. And you talk about the 70s, but I can remember in the 90s is when I was in high school. We quit. My grandpa was all in on hogs. He loved having hogs around. And he was in his 80s, and we quit raising hogs and I asked my dad about it recently, and he said, well, we got to the point where you just had to expand. There was all these massive hog buildings going up, raising all these hogs. You just had to expand to where you were so big, to make it profitable. And that was like 95, 98, the hog market completely collapsed. So these people that built these giant hog buildings, all went broke, or they either went broke or they went to exclusive contracts with pork packers. And then in 90, I think it was like it was around in the late 90s, my dad was feeding cattle, and he got to the point where it was like, well, I think we had lots that would hold like 300 head of cattle. And it was the point where you either have to expand to where you can hold thousands, or it's just not profitable to do that anymore. And so we quit feeding cattle, and now we just have a cow-calf operation, which was really, as far as livestock in this part of the country, the only really that still has like an open market. Most calves are still sold in an auction barn. And that was just the 90s. But that's how it's always kind of went. You either get bigger or you quit. And both of those times, I think with the pork and the beef, like, we made the right decision. If you look at history, we would have lost a ton of money on the hogs. They went to where they were hardly worth the price of gas to get them to town. Just a couple years after we got out of it. And with the environmental regulations, and I know a lot of regenerative people don't like to hear the word feedlot, but I mean, this was in the 90s, right, where that is how, grass-fed really wasn't even thought of back then.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So that's how we were doing it. And, back then it was a lot different than how it is now. As far as feedlot.
You can't even compare, and it's not fair to compare, and you look at the mid 90s, like you said, 95. I mean, we had NAFTA, we had major food consolidations that went global at that time. We've had 4 major global food consolidations that have happened since 95. And the last one just happened in 2017, 18. And it'll be pretty historical looking back in 10 years, what happened during those times. Well, a lot of people need to look at 1995 and whatever happened in the hog industry and how we went NAFTA and how, people did get driven out of the hog industry, really did get captured in certain ways. And they've had success doing that. They've had success doing it in dairy. They've had success doing it in chicken, fowl. They've had success in hog. And now they're coming after beef in the same way. And why would they not? Because they're all the same now. Tyson being a poultry, from poultry and hog, and now they basically have control over beef as well. It's a consolidation that it ruins everybody except for their profit margins and their power over the global food group that they've created. And once you start understanding that, you in your mind, you go, hey man, I'm going to get a little bit, I'm going to get this on a more micro scale. I know what they're doing macro. And so I think that we do have good times ahead. We do have a new mindset that's coming, that's actually being pioneered because of the prohibition that's going on. Prohibition of being able to be an animal producer, be it, through the old ways of, factory farm, feedlots, whatever it is, to regenerative. It's all shifting into a good direction that actually, I believe now that we're going to have a movement that is going to become popular, and it'll be a way for people to kind of create a new lifestyle that they can kind of rely on. And it has some heritage in it. It has some tradition. It brings people like you into the mix of, look at your hat rack behind you. I want one of those. So I need to get one of those from you. So, let's talk.
So I don't make this one, but this was actually an antique. I think it's out of, Sioux City stockyards. I got it from my wife's from Sioux City, and their family, her grandpa gave it to me. So
that's phenomenal. I mean, I love that. I mean,
that top one's a buffalo. So that's
is
a
it
buffalo.
really? Okay. Tell us everything about it there. So you got the buffalo, you got the bison on top. What's the middle one there?
That's just probably off of an old cow. And then the bottom one's a Texas Longhorn for sure. Yeah.
Right. So. What's your passion? Is your passion that right there, doing that? What is it you look forward to doing these days?
What I really look forward to is the Lonesome Land stuff. I mean, a lot of this stuff I've been doing the Hornworks for 16 years, and I can, it's kind of almost, my mind just wanders while I do it because I don't have to concentrate on it too much anymore. And really, I'm just thinking about Lonesome Lands all the time. But like I said, it's been months since I put anything out, but I've gotten some different stuff, and I really like to do more with YouTube. I've got a drone now and GoPro stuff, and I've trying to been learning how to do things and kind of just tell more of the stories. Lonesome Lands has, if you followed for very long or even a few years, it's kind of never really had a focus, or, it's just kind of evolved and just been more of a fluid thing, just kind of seeing where it goes. I kind of just started it on a whim, and then I got into this where I saw these major problems in agriculture, but the whole goal, and I'm sure you come up with it too, is to just be able to get to the consumer and to get their attention, and do it in a way that, for me, the goal now is to do it in a way that's enjoyable for me. Because sometimes, like if you followed my YouTube, it's not that enjoyable for me just to sit down in front of the camera and, explain things. But that's what I've done because it does get to people, and I think it's good. But, and the reason I take these long breaks and don't get any content out of there is because it's hard to get motivated if you're not enjoying it. And so I'm trying to get to a place where I'm really enjoying it and hopefully can get profitable. Also, that make it enjoyable too.
I tell everybody that what's the Beef Initiative? Well, it's what you make it as an individual. There's so many things that you can get from the Beef Initiative. We're selling beef now. We haven't talked about Bitcoin yet, but you and I will talk about Bitcoin in the future. But we're doing a decentralized sound money way that we can have that peer-to-peer transactional power. To where you and I, if you're set up on, that's what Jason Rick of Rick Ranches in Colorado. He set up, Cole Bolton of K&C Cattle down there in Austin. He's the one that supplies our beef through the Beef Initiative, and he accepts beef and Bitcoin. And it's something he has control over, and especially now with his processing center. So it's part of that market access. But, Beef Initiative is a lifestyle, and you bringing it up, you need to do stuff that you can enjoy. Well, you and I meeting and me following you from day one was because of your YouTube channel. And, we were talking about getting you some more help, with our production team, with Texas Slim's vision. There's Texas Slim Media that we're going to be releasing out formally here pretty soon. We're going to give those ranchers a chance. Somebody like you you need to educate and you want to provide content that's based on your lifestyle and your trade craft. And so we're going to help people do that. And so by saying that, we're going to help you get up to speed and everything. Everybody definitely needs to go to lonesomelands.com. I posted a t-shirt earlier that you're selling. It was that plant-based t-shirt that has a pile of cow shit, which it is, that's plant-based. So it's a good t-shirt. So you guys go to my YouTube and check it out. But, we're going to help you in any which way. Everybody listening to this, from YouTube, all of the different channels that we're doing with podcasting 2.0. There's a lot of people out there wanting to hear your voice and what you're doing. What are you doing July 22nd through 24th? Are you available?
Well, my wife is due to have a baby here pretty early August. So I'm kind of stuck at home for the next few weeks. We just went on a trip, and after we got home, we were like, we need to stick around.
Time to anchor in here. We got something coming.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, I was going to let you know, man. You had 2 tickets to Lonesome to the Beef Initiative conference if you wanted it. So, but I think you have higher priorities right now.
Yeah, but I saw that, and I definitely would love to meet you and the rest of the crew in person. But
yeah, well, we'll be meeting. I mean, I just went and traveled around the, Tennessee, North Carolina, the Virginias, and, Arkansas, Missouri, all that area of the country. I'll be doing a Midwest tour at some point in time. We have a big year ahead of us. We're going to have more conferences. There'll be other times that we all get together and we're going to build content together. We're going to help each other out on social media. We're going to help each other on, podcasting 2.0, YouTube. we're going to keep on having these conversations every once in a while whenever you're able. And, you got a little one on the way. So I think this has been a very good first kickoff, discovery, and this will build. This is how we shake each other's hands digitally right now. We build that relationship and that friendship, and we give each other a voice. That's what we need to do these days. We need to, get a new form of food intelligence out there, a new market access way of thinking, and create a new consumer demand that goes straight to the people that are trying to feed us. So in closing, Jim, is there anything that you would like anybody else to know right now until the next time that you and I get together?
No, just that I do plan on putting some more stuff out there, and like I said, I wanted to say thanks because sometimes these things motivate me when I get to talk to somebody, and like you talk about giving a voice to ranchers. It's pretty easy to realize or to get lost when you're out in the middle of nowhere and you don't really talk to people very often. So yeah, I appreciate it, and now I've got a little motivation to get out there and get some more content.
Yeah, let's get busy. Let's get busy building. That's what we got to do.
Right.
During times of mass prohibition, there are times of mass innovation, and it's people like us that do that. So, let's move forward. Let's everybody get out to lonesomelands.com. Let's go to and follow Jim at Lonesome Lands on Twitter. Let's support. Let's have fun. Let's create a lifestyle out of it. And, like I said, let's everybody kind of do this together and, keep the dialogue going and the SAT streaming. Thank you, everybody, for joining us in 2.0. Thank you, Adam Curry, for helping us get set up. I'm told I can wrangle people in pretty well, so I'm glad I wrangled you in, Jim. It's been a pleasure, and we'll be talking soon, okay? Everybody else, remember, go to beefinitiative.com. We got tickets. We got education on Bitcoin. We've got a new scholarship program that we're doing for the American Rancher. We've got our conference. Everybody get to that conference. We now have a 2-day pass that you can buy. It's a little bit cheaper for those people that are local, really in the state of Colorado or bucked up to it like New Mexico or Kansas or Texas. So everybody pay attention to what's going on in the Beef Initiative. Thank you for your support. And Jim, thank you so much for what you do. And great to have you on the show. Have a great day. And we'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You bet. Here at the Beef Initiative, we encourage all you ranchers out there to tell us who and where you are so we can let everybody know. They're looking for you. This time I'm shouting out KNC Cattle out of Austin, Texas. KNCCattle.com. Cole, he's a 4th generational Texas rancher. He knows what he's doing.